Hello everyone, this is part 12 of What If Naruto Had Some Help, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. That night, as most of the village of Konoha was sleeping or preparing to sleep, 4 figures stood on top of the Hokage mountain. Each was dressed exactly alike with black cloaks and masked with the kanji for NE on them. One male said, "So do you all understand the plan?" All 3 figures of the other figures said, "Hi Captain." The captain nods and said, "Right, let's split into our team and move out," as all 4 left in puffs of smoke. 2 figures appeared on top of a 2-story house and they used hand signs to talk. Slowly one figure crawled down the side of the house onto a balcony before pulling out a small metal card and slipping it inside the door to the balcony and pushing up as a lock clicked and the figure pushed the door open and stepped inside. A few moments later the second figure came inside as well. They slowly walked through the room and opened the door to the hall and walked down the hall with as much stealth as possible before stopping outside a bedroom door. One figure put a paper tag on the doorknob and both pulled out a katana. The first held up his hand and counted down from 5, and when it hit 0 the tag exploded and both charged in. An elderly man, startled by the explosion, reached for his glasses and before he could react a blade LD his back into his heart, king him. A flick of the blade and both figures left in a swirl of leaves. At the same time an elderly woman was sitting in front of a fire in her 1-story home reading a book when a knock was heard at her door. She frowned as she closed her book and walked to the door and opened it and said, "What is it now?" seeing a Rutanbu at her steps. A female voice behind her, making her eyes wide, said, "Danzo sends his regards," as her head was removed from her shoulders. Again both figures left in a swirl of leaves. They appeared on top of a building in the center of town, almost perfectly timed on arriving, and the captain said, "Both sub-targets eliminated. Now for primary target," as they shushined one more time and appeared in an underground base. They walked with perfect steps, making it sound like only one person was walking as they passed a patrol. They soon arrived at a door and knocked once. A few minutes later a voice said, "Enter," and all 4 walked in and Danzo looked up and asked, "What is it?" One said, "Sir, patrols have reported that Homaru and Koharu have been found, sir." Danzo said, "When were they killed and who found them?" The one who talked before said, "They were killed no less than an hour ago at most, sir, and they were found by Anbu." Danzo narrowed his eyes as he looked at the 4 and said, "Remove your mask." The one who spoke for the group nods and reaches for the mask, and when it was halfway off a pair of hands grabbed Danzo feet from below and he went wide-eyed as he tried to move but couldn't because tree roots came out of the desk and one of the 4 went up in smoke as 2 blades cut Danzo head off and the other into his own heart. The captain came out of the floor and took his mask off, showing Kakashi, and raised his headband, copying Danzo writing, and wrote a note that read, "To Konoha. For years now I have undermined the village, working with the enemies of our village for power, and I can no longer live with myself. I have taken the lives of my 2 closest allies and now I end mine in traditional with a nameless second aiding me. Goodbye Konoha and forgive me. Danzo." Kakashi nods and all 4 left in a swirl of leaves as the patrol that had passed earlier burst into the room, having felt the chakra use, and found the body of Danzo and his note. The 4 figures appeared in the Hokage office and Kakashi said, "It's done, sir." The third said, "Remove your mask." Each of them reached for their mask, showing Tenzu, Iruka, and Yugao. The third said, "I see your team you selected was very well chosen, Inu. You have Moku, Dolphin, and Nibi. May I ask why you chose them though?" Kakashi said, "I chose them all because they are the best at what must be done." Quote. The third said, "Yes, I know that very well and are among my most trusted. I had Nibi work with Naruto security detail outside of the academy after Weasel retired. I had Dolphin keep an eye on him in the academy, and Moku is the only other captain I would allow unsupervised watch of Naruto besides yourself. Very well, all of you shall receive your mission pay as bonuses on your next mission. I do not want any word of these events to spread and no reports." Dismissed. The 4 figures disappeared and the third looked at a picture on his desk of his genin team and he thought, "Goodbye my old friends. I will miss you and join you someday soon. Forgive me, as he closed his eyes. The next morning Naruto got up and took a shower keeping his eye closed when he was washing his hair, and he frowned as he got dressed and walked outside after making sure nobody was in the alley, and then he walked around the corner and nearly knocked Ino over, who looked back up the alley and said, "Hello Naruto," seeing Miko. Naruto said, "Something like that. She wasn't home." Ino said, "I see." Naruto frowned and said, "Hey Ino, can you help me with a problem?" Ino looked at him and said, "I can try." Naruto said, I kind of need a haircut because I can't leave my eye uncovered too long right now, and I need it uncovered to wash my hair, and it takes a while because of how much I have." Ino looked at him and asked, "What happened to your eye?" "I mean, I know something happened to it, but what?" Naruto frowned and said, "I lost my eye and someone gave me a transplant. I don't really want to talk about it." Ino nods and said, "Come back inside with me, I will see what I can do for you," as she unlocked the shop and Naruto followed. Ino said, "Go ahead and sit at the table there and I will get some scissor and a comb." Naruto sat down, and a few minutes later Ino came back and she said, "Just relax, okay?" Naruto said, "I will," as he reached up and pulled his headband off while closing his eyes. Ino saw a small scaring around the eye and thought, too bad he lost his eye. He has eyes that you can get lost in, and Naruto asked, "Is something wrong, Ino?" Ino snapped out of her thought and said, "No, I was just thinking of how to cut it and I have the perfect way," as she put a towel over him and began to cut his hair. A little while later she stepped back, taking the towel off, and said, "All done," as she smiled and thought, he looks just like the Yondaime now with his hair cut like that. Naruto slipped back on his hiatus and opened his eyes, and Ino had pulled out a mirror and he said, "I look like my da," as he stopped realizing what he was going to say. Ino's eyes got wide and said, "I see. So your dad was the Yondaime. Kind of explains why he used you then." Naruto frowned and said, "Look Ino, please." Ino put her finger to his lip and said, "I won't tell anyone. I promise." Naruto nods and said, "Thank you Ino. How much do I owe you?" Ino put her finger to her chin and said, "How about dinner?" Naruto blinked and blinked again and asked, "Are you asking me out?" Ino said, "Something like that. Look Naruto, when Dad came home to get ready to go search for you, he told me you had been captured by a missing nin. I was worried about you so much that my chest hurt. I didn't realize then why, but yesterday when I told you I was worried about you, I realized that the reason I was worried about you is because I care for you." Naruto watched her and frowned a moment and asked, "In what way?" Ino said, "I'm not sure. That's why I want to have dinner with you. It will give me a chance to figure out what I feel and." Naruto chuckled as he put his finger to her lip and said, "Shikamaru is right, blondes are troublesome. Tell you what, Thursday. Meet me on the Hokage Monument at 6 p.m. Deal?" Ino said, "Deal." Naruto looked at the clock and said, "I think we had better get going or we're going to be late." Ino nods and motions toward the door, and Naruto walked out and Ino locked up, and they both began to walk down the road in silence. Naruto cut his eyes at Ino and thought, what came over me back there? It felt like Miko again. Ino saw Naruto was concentrating hard and she grabbed his hand to get his attention, and he looked at her since he was on her right and he could see her with his left eye, and she said, "Today is supposed to be a day to have fun and relax. Don't think so hard or you're going to give yourself a headache." Naruto said, "All right, I will try," as he looked back down the road. Ino smiled and looked down the road as they walked with Ino still holding his hand. An Anbu appeared in front of them and said, "I'm sorry to ruin your date, but the Hokage would like to see you Naruto." Ino and Naruto both blinked and Naruto asked, "Date, what do you mean?" The Anbu sweet dropped and said, "I just assumed since you were holding hands that you were both on a date." Both blondes looked down and quickly pulled their hands apart, blushing, and Ino said, "We weren't on a date, it was just a comforting gesture." "Right." Naruto said, "Yeah, what she said." The Anbu said, "Anyways, shall we go?" Naruto nods and the Anbu shushens the two of them away, and Ino sighed as she continued walking. When Naruto appeared in the Hokage office, the Anbu quickly left and the third-eyed Naruto a moment and said, "I see you changed your look Naruto." Naruto said, "Yeah, Ino cut my hair for me this morning since it's such a pain to wash it trying to keep my eyes closed for so long." The third said, I see. Now since you're back and had time to recover, I would like to debrief you on what happened on the mission. Naruto sighed and said, the trip there was nothing notable, with mostly just a few helpful words about traveling from Anko. We arrived and the people were looking at us funny, and Anko told me it was just they didn't like strangers. We met up with Team 8, at which point I began to interrogate the prisoner and he gave us some info, and Anko decided based on the info she would deal with the situation herself and left me in the village. I then explored the village and came across a local gambling Naruto brother and started to try my hand at the games, and through some eventful talking with a working girl, she discreetly told me the truth, how the How town was being controlled by the bandits and how the actual missing people were in the back of the brothel and it was all a trap. I left a clone when I used the restroom and left it there to distract while I went back where Team 8 was along with the prisoner, and I screwed intimidation and went for submission and began questioning him again on what exactly Anko was walking into, and he called me a Jinchuriki. It was at that point I asked him about a Katsuki. The third asked, how are you aware of a Katsuki? Naruto said, I've heard talk about them in passing. That's all I will say, as he looked at the third. The third frowned and said, continue then. Naruto said, after he made some comments about it being a trap, Team 8 and myself followed Anko sent to where we came across her battling, and I engaged them to help Anko. The third said, that was foolish, Naruto, and you didn't follow procedure and wait for Kurenai, who was the senior ninja at the time, orders. Naruto said, those who follow the rules are trash, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than trash. The third bit his lip and was silent for several moments as he thought, my god, Naruto turning into another Kakashi. As he finally said, continue. Naruto frowned a moment and asked, how much of my actual skills are you aware of, Gigi? The third said, unfortunately not as much as I should be, it seems. Anko reported to me about your rose whips. How did that come about anyways? Naruto said, Inoiki-sensei will be better to explain it than I am, since he informed me what was happening when a plant tried to eat my finger. Anyways, if you know about that, then I can tell you that I have some Anko worked on that now contain 5 poisons from what she told me. I was able to hit Itachi once while he was distracted, but I was able to hit Kisame several times, so he SD faster than Itachi did, but it still took a while. Things went too quick for me to remember after that. All I really remember is waking up with Itachi and Kisame S and having this eye. The third asked, what about why you went to see Sasuke instead of coming here first? Naruto said, it was a personal matter between us, sir. I was talking to him about this eye and what it does. The third frowned and asked, is there anything else you would like to add to your report? Naruto said, nope. The third said, very well. You're dismissed, Naruto. Naruto quickly left and the third thought, when did you start hiding secrets from me, Naruto? What all are you hiding? As Naruto left, he saw Sasuke on top of a building and Sasuke jumped down and said, follow me. Naruto frowned and followed him toward the training ground. When they got there, Sasuke turned and asked, did you do anything to those 3 on that scroll last night, Dobe? Naruto said, no, I slept and went and saw a doctor I trust about this eye since it was hurting me. I was told to let it adjust a few days before using it. Why? Sasuke frowned and pulled out a piece of paper and handed it to Naruto, and Naruto read. General Anbu report. At 11:35 p.m. the body of Danzo was found having committed S. It has been confirmed that prior to his death he killed who he claimed as his partners Koharu and Homura, the elder advisors. Upon inspection it had been confirmed both had been killed in their homes. At this time the case is closed. Naruto looked at Sasuke and asked, what are you thinking? Sasuke said, it's too much of a coincidence. The day I learn the truth they turn up S. Naruto asked, and you think I was involved? Sasuke said, no. One thing I know for sure is when you do something you won't deny it. That's why I asked you first. Naruto frowned and looked at the report and said, I agree, it is too much of a coincidence. I don't think Gigi had them killed, thought. Sasuke asked, why not? He has the power to. Naruto nods and Sasuke said, why then do you think it wasn't him? Naruto crossed his arms and leaned against a tree and said, think about it, H's had years to kill them and never did. Those 2 were his genin teammates. H has known them all his life. He could never bring himself to harm them. That is why I think whoever did K them if it wasn't Danzo is trying to frame the Hokage and make you hate them. Sasuke asked, me, why me Dobe? Naruto scrunched his nose and said, how did you get the Anbu report Sasuke? I could maybe get them but I am the apprentice of the head of Anbu. Sasuke frowned and said, it was in my room this morning when I woke up. Naruto said, and you didn't find that odd? Sasuke glared at Naruto and thought, damn it, how did I miss something so obvious the Dobe saw it? Naruto asked, who would have the most to gain from you hating the Hokage? Sasuke thought a moment and said, I don't know. Naruto frowned and said, I don't know either. Look team, I got someplace to be so I will catch you later. Sasuke saw Naruto leave and thought, damn it, what am I to do now? When Naruto arrived he saw the Naras, Akamikis, and Yamanakas all playing a game together and Naruto thought, they all look happy together, as he remembered what Rose said. Flashback. Rose said, you may make friends enemies and enemies friends. You may have to betray everyone you hold dear. If you're not ready for that then you will fail. Make sure before you go down that road you can live with what you have afterwards. If you don't you will become someone who will always be alone. Someone who can't ever find true happiness. End flashback. Naruto thought, do I want to kill Madara so much that I would betray them? As he saw Ino look at him and wave and Naruto smiled a little and thought, I've always been alone. People want to be with me now. I won't go back to being alone. As he smiled and walked toward them. When he got there he said, sorry I'm late. I got lost on the road of life. Each of the adults face-faltered and thought, oh god, another Kakashi. Yoshino said, Naruto, I swear right now if you start reading Ica Paradise I will castrate you. Naruto reached into his weapons pouch and pulled out a book and said, you say something. Yoshino growled and said, new game, King of the Mountain and Naruto the Mountain. Naruto I got wide and he started to back up and everyone turned and began trying to dogpile on him. After about an hour of Naruto dodging all of their attempts to capture him Shikaku said, alright, that's enough Naruto. Naruto smiled and Ino asked, how did you get so good at dodging Naruto-kun? Naruto caught the kun, but ignored it and said, you don't run from Anko constantly and not learn. Shikaku asked, so are you willing to tell us what happened now Naruto? All we know is you traded yourself for Hinata after Kurenai was knocked out. Everyone was looking at him and he sighed and said, basically all it came down to was I got lucky that Itachi was a spy for Konoha or I would be S. He knew I had poisoned him within moments and he could have warned Kisame about it or tried to force Anko or me to give him the antidote but he chose to S along with Kisame rather than to live. The only reason I am alive right now is because Itachi let me live. Not because I was better, not because I was stronger, faster, smarter, just lucky that he was a spy and not a real enemy. As he had turned around during his talk as he had closed his eye and tears were falling down his face. Everyone frowned at this and Ino walked forward and put her arms around him from behind and Naruto stiffened a moment and relaxed. Ino said softly, I'm glad that you're so lucky then. Naruto smiled a small smile and said, you don't know how much that means to me Ino, as he relaxed into the hold Ino had on him. When Ino finally realized what she'd done and the way it looked she slowly let go and looked around and blinked and asked, where did everyone go? As Naruto turned around as well and blinked and said, I think they left us alone for some reason. Ino blushed and said, Naruto-kun. Naruto asked, when did I become Kun Ino? As he looked confused. Ino bit her lip and said, well, I think it fits. Naruto looked at her and asked, why is that Ino? Ino looked around and said, because. I said so. Naruto blinked and asked, what kind of reason is that? Ino smirked and said, this kind. As she put her foot behind Naruto's and pushed him backwards and Naruto fell backwards onto his back. Ino walked over and put her foot on his chest and said, don't ever scare me like that again you jackass and don't act like you're just alive because you were just lucky. If you were lucky you never would have even been caught in the first place. You were smart enough to use poisons to weaken them so don't sell yourself short. Now come on, dinner's inside today because we're having ice cream and it would melt out here. Naruto looked up at her and asked, what's ice cream? Ino froze in her tracks and slowly turned her head and said, you're serious, aren't you? You never had ice cream. Naruto nods and Ino held her hand out and he took it pulling himself to his feet and she said, follow me. as she began to lead him inside of the Nara house where Naruto enjoyed ice cream for the first time. After that, Naruto, who was still a little tired, went back to his loft and went to sleep. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.